At 3 minutes ago, the political landscape in Washington shifted yet again. Sources confirm that Carney has publicly responded to Trump's explosive threats over the Gordie Howe International Bridge deal, setting off a chain reaction that has left the administration scrambling. According to insiders, this is not a routine statement. It is a direct challenge to Trump's authority, signaling that even his closest allies are no longer willing to bend under pressure. The context is critical. Just hours earlier, Trump had unleashed a series of Truth Social posts attacking Carney personally, accusing him of undermining national interests and threatening retaliation if the bridge deal did not align with his political agenda. Sources describe these posts as unprecedented in their intensity, a full-on digital assault aimed at coercing compliance. But Carney, sources say, has refused to back down, delivering a measured yet pointed response that highlights both his legal authority and strategic independence. Behind closed doors, senior GOP senators and congressional aides are described as watching this standoff unfold with growing alarm. One insider explained, Carney's response shows he is no longer operating under fear of Trump's wrath. It's a signal to the entire administration that the Gordie Howe Bridge is now off-limits politically, legally, and operationally. Sources indicate that federal oversight teams are already reviewing the deal in real time, assessing compliance and ensuring no deviations from statutory obligations. Financial markets reacted immediately. Contractors tied to the bridge project reportedly halted certain operations pending clarification, while political donors began quietly questioning the stability of Trump-aligned initiatives. Multiple sources confirm that Carney's firm stand has created the first significant fracture in Trump's influence over high-stakes infrastructure negotiations, signaling a broader crisis for the administration's ability to control key policy projects. By sunrise, Washington was in full alert. The Gordie Howe Bridge deal, once a symbol of negotiation leverage and strategic prowess, has now become a litmus test of power, loyalty, and political survival. And Carney has thrown down the gauntlet. By mid-morning, the full scale of the confrontation between Trump and Carney became evident. Sources inside the White House report that aides were frantically drafting talking points and damage control briefings, attempting to contain both public fallout and internal panic. Trump's Truth Social feed had erupted overnight, with posts calling Carney a traitor and threatening punitive action against anyone who sided with him. But Carney's measured public statement, according to multiple insiders, ignored the threats entirely, asserting that the Gordie Howe Bridge negotiations would proceed according to federal law and long-standing contractual obligations. Inside Congress, Republican senators are described as watching the standoff unfold like a high-stakes chess match. One aide confided that several GOP leaders were privately discussing how Carney's refusal to yield could shift the balance of power in future negotiations. This isn't just about a bridge, the aide explained. It's a signal to everyone in the administration that Trump cannot dictate operational decisions through intimidation alone. Meanwhile, at the Department of Transportation and Pentagon oversight offices, career officials were quietly documenting every interaction and directive related to the bridge project, ensuring there was a paper trail for legal review. Contractors involved in the $3.8 billion project reportedly paused sensitive operations pending further guidance, creating additional tension as federal and state deadlines loomed. Political donors and party insiders were also reacting. Sources confirmed that several key GOP funders contacted McConnell-aligned strategists expressing alarm at Trump's aggressive public threats. According to one insider, they are watching Trump's influence erode in real time, and Carney's defiance is accelerating that process. By the afternoon, Washington had entered a state of heightened alert. Analysts warn that Carney's stand could embolden other officials, creating a domino effect of resistance against Trump's increasingly aggressive and unilateral directives. What began as a negotiation over a single infrastructure project has now become a battle for control, credibility, and authority within the Trump administration. By late afternoon, the political stakes had escalated dramatically. Carney's refusal to bend to Trump's threats over the Gordie Howe Bridge deal was no longer a simple administrative disagreement. It had become a full-blown institutional confrontation. Sources inside the White House report that aides were holding emergency strategy sessions, trying to anticipate Trump's next move, while simultaneously attempting to reassure other key federal officials that Carney's stance was legally sound and politically defensible. Trump, according to multiple insiders, was livid. His Truth Social feed continued to explode with posts targeting Carney, labeling him incompetent and a threat to America's security, while warning that those siding with him would face career-ending consequences. But Carney's team responded by publicly emphasizing legal compliance, contract integrity, and fiduciary responsibility, effectively neutralizing Trump's public threats. Federal lawyers have confirmed to sources that Carney's statement was crafted to protect both the government and himself from retaliatory action, leaving Trump with limited options to escalate without exposing himself to legal scrutiny. Inside Congress, Republican senators were described as watching the unfolding standoff with growing alarm and intrigue. Some expressed concerns that Trump's behavior could trigger a larger institutional backlash, while others began quietly exploring the political and legal consequences of escalating the confrontation. Sources indicate that several GOP members have already reached out to Carney's team to signal support, though they remain cautious about publicly breaking with Trump yet. Meanwhile, federal contractors and Canadian officials involved in the Gordie Howe Bridge project were placed on alert. Reports confirm that work schedules were being reviewed and adjusted in real time, creating logistical headaches and raising questions about the feasibility of project deadlines. The public, meanwhile, began catching wind of the dispute through leaks and social media chatter, turning the bridge project into a symbol of Trump's weakening grip over critical infrastructure and governance. By evening, the message was clear. Carney was no longer just resisting Trump's threats. He was reshaping the balance of power in Washington, and everyone in the administration knew it. As night fell in Washington, the tension inside the White House reached a fever pitch. Trump, sources report, convened an emergency meeting with top advisors, demanding immediate action to coerce Carney into compliance. According to insiders, aides tried to warn the president that any overt pressure could trigger legal consequences, but Trump reportedly dismissed the warnings, insisting that no one defies me and gets away with it. This unfiltered rage, insiders say, only further emboldened Carney, who remained publicly steadfast and legally unassailable. Federal marshals, already monitoring security and compliance on major infrastructure projects, were placed on alert in anticipation of possible interference or threats directed at Carney or the bridge's contractors. Sources confirm that Carney's legal team has already documented each threat, each directive, and every attempt at intimidation, ensuring that any overreach by Trump or his allies could be used as evidence in potential investigations. The meticulous record-keeping is a clear signal. This is no longer just politics, it is a legal and procedural battlefield. Inside the GOP, whispers of revolt grew louder. Senators who had previously avoided public confrontation began privately signaling their concerns. One Republican aide told sources, "Carney's defiance is a wake-up call. If he can stand up to Trump, others can too. The question is, who will be next?" Multiple donors, according to leaks, are already reconsidering funding commitments, worried that the administration's instability could imperil both elections and investment priorities. Meanwhile, Canadian officials overseeing the Gordie Howe Bridge project have reportedly initiated contingency planning, citing political uncertainty and potential delays caused by administrative interference. Contractors involved in the $3.8 billion project have begun reassessing timelines and budgets, creating a ripple effect that has national and international implications. By the end of the day, it was clear to all observers. Trump's authority had been publicly challenged in a way that could no longer be ignored. And Carney's steadfast refusal to yield had turned a single infrastructure negotiation into a symbol of institutional resistance and political vulnerability. By the following morning, the consequences of Carney's stand were rippling through every corner of the administration. Sources confirm that Trump, frustrated and increasingly desperate, attempted direct intervention, summoning several senior aides to pressure them into forcing Carney to relent. Insiders describe a tense scene. Aides were taking notes frantically, trying to calm the president while warning that any unilateral action could provoke legal and political backlash of historic proportions. Trump's allies were divided. Some advocated for aggressive action, including threatening Carney with removal or other punitive measures. Others, however, warned that any attempt to override Carney's legal authority could trigger congressional inquiries, federal investigations, and potentially criminal exposure. According to sources, this split has created a genuine internal crisis, with staffers unsure who to follow and what could happen next. Meanwhile, Carney remained publicly unshaken. His team issued a formal statement emphasizing that the Gordie Howe Bridge project must comply with federal regulations, contractual obligations, and international agreements. According to insider reports, this statement was deliberately crafted to neutralize Trump's threats while reinforcing Carney's legal authority, leaving the president with no clear avenue for escalation without exposing himself to scrutiny. The financial implications are already being felt. Contractors tied to the bridge reportedly paused certain operations, citing regulatory uncertainty and the ongoing political standoff. Canadian stakeholders are also closely monitoring every development, signaling that delays could have long-term economic and diplomatic repercussions. Sources suggest that some Republican donors and party insiders are quietly questioning their support, concerned that Trump's public meltdown could jeopardize both infrastructure initiatives and broader electoral prospects. By late morning, Washington had entered a new phase of crisis management. Trump's influence over key projects, once considered absolute, is now openly contested. Carney's refusal to yield has transformed the Gordie Howe Bridge from a single construction project into a national symbol of political courage, institutional integrity, and the limits of presidential power. By midday, the standoff between Trump and Carney had escalated into a full-blown political crisis. Sources inside the White House report that Trump's frustration had reached a new level, with aides describing him as volatile and unpredictable. Multiple staffers confirmed that he demanded immediate legal action to undermine Carney's authority, including exploring ways to reassign oversight of the Gordie Howe Bridge project to loyalists. Yet legal counsel repeatedly warned that any attempt to bypass Carney would constitute a direct violation of federal law, exposing the president to unprecedented scrutiny. Meanwhile, Carney's team was operating with unprecedented precision. Every communication, every directive from the administration, and every attempt at coercion was being documented and archived. Sources confirm that this meticulous record-keeping is part of a broader strategy to protect the project, uphold the law, and create accountability for any illegal or improper actions taken against the bridge initiative. Inside Congress, Republican senators and aides are described as growing increasingly nervous. Leaked internal communications indicate that some GOP members were quietly strategizing ways to publicly distance themselves from the Trump administration's heavy-handed tactics. Carney has set a precedent, one source said. If the administration can't force him to comply, it signals that no official is untouchable, and Trump's influence is slipping fast. The political fallout was already impacting infrastructure operations. Contractors on the $3.8 billion Gordie Howe Bridge project were delaying sensitive work, citing regulatory uncertainty and the need to ensure compliance with federal oversight. Canadian officials involved in the project reportedly began contingency planning, expressing concern that prolonged political chaos could derail schedules and inflate costs, creating a cross-border economic headache. By late afternoon, analysts in Washington were already calling this confrontation a defining moment in Trump's presidency. Carney's refusal to yield, paired with the legal and political safeguards in place, had turned a single infrastructure project into a litmus test for presidential power, party loyalty, and institutional accountability. By evening, Trump's frustration had reached a boiling point. Sources inside the White House describe aides scrambling to contain what they called a full-scale meltdown. Trump reportedly convened a series of emergency calls with loyalists, demanding Carney's immediate compliance, while publicly issuing threats on Truth Social that labeled him incompetent, a traitor to America, and warned that anyone siding with him would face severe consequences. Meanwhile, Carney's legal team doubled down, issuing additional clarifications emphasizing contractual obligations, regulatory compliance, and federal oversight. Insiders report that these statements were designed not only to maintain authority, but also to shield federal employees and contractors from potential retaliation, making it clear that any attempt by Trump to force compliance could carry both legal and political consequences. Republican senators were quietly analyzing the fallout. Sources reveal that several high-profile GOP leaders privately questioned whether Trump's aggressive behavior could jeopardize infrastructure funding, election prospects, and party unity. At the same time, donors and Wall Street strategists reportedly began reviewing contingency plans, concerned that the standoff could have far-reaching economic consequences. The Canadian government also took notice. Officials monitoring the Gordie Howe Bridge project began preparing contingency responses in case delays or interference persisted. Contractors were warned to halt non-essential work until legal clarity emerged, creating a ripple effect across supply chains and budgets. By the night's end, Washington had entered unprecedented uncertainty, with Trump's influence over federal operations visibly weakening and Carney emerging as the public face of resistance, symbolizing institutional integrity against presidential overreach. The next morning, leaks from inside the administration revealed that Trump's attempts to intimidate Carney had not gone unnoticed. Sources confirm that senior aides warned the president that any direct action against Carney could trigger congressional investigations and federal lawsuits, effectively tying his hands legally while damaging his credibility politically. Carney's public communications continued to emphasize the rule of law. Officials reported that he personally oversaw the drafting of memos and directives for the Gordie Howe Bridge project, ensuring full legal compliance while resisting political pressure. This methodical approach forced Trump's team to pivot strategies, relying increasingly on media attacks and social media threats rather than actionable legal moves. Internally, Republican senators were now divided into factions, those still loyal to Trump and those quietly strategizing to limit his influence. According to multiple sources, this fissure has opened the door for Carney to become a symbol of lawful governance and accountability, gaining support from moderates and even some staunch Trump critics. Financial stakeholders also began to react. Contractors and suppliers involved in the bridge project paused certain operations, citing regulatory uncertainty, while Canadian officials demanded assurances that U.S. political interference would not compromise deadlines. Experts suggest that these delays could cost millions and have long-term diplomatic implications. By midday, analysts were warning that this confrontation was no longer about a bridge. It had transformed into a national test of executive authority, institutional checks, and the durability of U.S. governance structures. As the week progressed, the standoff between Trump and Carney intensified. Sources inside the White House described the president as increasingly isolated, with top aides and legal advisors warning him of escalating risks if he attempted to forcibly override Carney's authority. Trump's public statements became more aggressive, yet increasingly ineffective in altering Carney's course. Carney, meanwhile, continued to maintain a calm and disciplined posture, issuing legal and operational directives that ensured the Gordie Howe Bridge project continued in compliance with federal law. Insiders note that every move he made was carefully documented, signaling to both domestic and international stakeholders that the project could not be sabotaged through political intimidation. Republican lawmakers were reportedly in emergency consultations, reviewing strategies to limit damage to both the party and the administration. Sources reveal that donor groups and influential GOP strategists are quietly pulling back support, concerned that Trump's inability to control internal operations could have long-term consequences for elections and governance. Canadian officials monitoring the project escalated warnings, signaling that ongoing political uncertainty could disrupt cross-border cooperation and inflate costs beyond the original $3.8 billion budget. Contractors were forced to recalibrate timelines, supply chains, and staffing, creating ripple effects across the U.S. economy. By the end of the week, observers noted a historic shift. A sitting president's authority had been publicly challenged and effectively resisted by a career official, highlighting a rare moment where institutional integrity overcame personal power. As the weekend approached, the standoff reached a critical point. Reports indicate that Trump attempted a last-minute push to regain control, issuing executive directives and mobilizing sympathetic staffers to pressure Carney. According to multiple sources, legal counsel intervened repeatedly, warning that such actions could constitute federal violations and open Trump to lawsuits, congressional inquiries, and possible criminal scrutiny. Carney's legal and operational team remained steadfast. Contractors and Canadian officials were kept fully informed, ensuring that project continuity and compliance remained unbroken. Leaks confirm that Carney's meticulous documentation of every interaction has created a comprehensive record that could shield the federal government and officials from retaliation, while exposing any illegal attempts to interfere. Within Congress, Republican senators were quietly strategizing next steps. Many see the standoff as an opportunity to reassert institutional authority over the executive branch, while donors and corporate stakeholders increasingly view Trump as politically toxic, limiting his ability to manipulate policy through intimidation. By Sunday evening, the Gordie Howe Bridge confrontation had become a national symbol of the limits of presidential power, the resilience of federal institutions, and the consequences of defying legal and procedural authority. Analysts suggest that this standoff may have long-lasting effects on Trump's influence, the cohesion of the Republican Party, and the balance of power in Washington for years to come.